Okay, everybody. Well, listen, I appreciate you all getting together. We've got Veterans Day coming up. And as part of this, we wanted to kind of talk a little bit about you veterans learned over the last couple of years by turning from Irvine, which was a bit of an inside game with a lot of politics, both in Sacramento and at the city halls, and turning at some point earlier in the year and moving towards organizing what veterans wanted. I think the question is who speaks for the veterans? What does the majority of the veterans in Orange County want? And it seems like you guys went and did that. You organized every single VFW hall and ultimately every city council around the idea of a veterans cemetery in a different place than was originally talked about. The current site right now is over at Gypsum Canyon. I forget how many acres it is. If any one of you can remind me, happy to hear that, of how many acres the current veteran cemetery is going to be. But that's where we're at right now. And what I wanted to kind of hear from you all a little bit or chat through is, what did you learn in organizing? I've worked in a lot of communities over time, and there's always kind of a question of what do the veterans want, on whether it's, out of the VA, out of their local leaders. What did you learn? Why did you go to organize?
Well, let me kick it off first, and thank you, Norberto, and thank you to Voice of OC for covering this. This is a very important project, and we appreciate that Voice has been reporting on it all the way through, and that makes a difference to us, and we express our appreciation to you. I think what we learned was that first, the veterans community is very, very diverse. And when I say diverse, it is it's a very small minority of people who come from all kinds of different backgrounds. It's a very diverse terms, racial, ethnic, and religious. And so it also has very diverse opinions politically, socially, and otherwise. So what we found was that first, in order to organize, and in order to organize in the future, is the issue has to be very broad based. It has to be something that the veterans community as a whole agrees about. I mean, we couldn't take this model, put it in a political campaign necessarily, or any other kind of activity that has such a diverse opinion. We just couldn't do it. So we found that once we found an issue that everybody agreed to, then we were able to coalesce. And it's a community in Orange County that can do a lot and have future. Getting everybody together is a challenge because of the diversity. So it's finding the right issue was number one. And number two was, I think, what, veterans in this community have, now learned, which is we have to speak with one voice. And we have to find those issues where we can collaborate with one. When we do speak with one voice, it is amazing the kind of influence that we can have in terms of advancing the veterans issue. So I think we learned that we can do this. It is tricky in terms of how we do it and what the issue is that we do it about. But once, kind of clear those that loud and singular voice here in the veterans community. And we also learned that once we find that issue and we join together, it is almost like it's almost like muscle training, that once the veterans have solidarity on an issue, that muscle memory of the training of standing together, standing shoulder to shoulder, putting aside our personal issues and putting aside our personal preferences. We're mission oriented. Once the mission is designated, that training comes right back, and we're standing shoulder to shoulder. So it's a great lesson, and I think it's something we can advance in the future on the right project with the right issues under the right circumstances. But it's not an automatic in the veterans community because of the diversity.
Little Irvine. How did you end up in Irvine? How did you begin the process in Irvine? What was it motivated you and some of the others? And feel free to speak about those that were involved, in the beginning of this idea. And how did you end up at Irvine? And what ultimately, in your opinion, why is it that Irvine fell short?
Well, Irvine encompassed MCAS El Toro when BRAC closed it down back in '99. And I had felt, and a number of others, in the wilderness mostly, felt that would be an ideal spot for a veteran cemetery because there was none in Orange County or nearby. And El Toro being a place where I served, where Nick and I flew off to Vietnam and many others, it seemed like the natural place for a cemetery. But there were long drawn out battles, of course, over whether it's going to be an airport or a great park or whatever it's going to be. And we still kept our there. And as things down, there were 2 acres of El Toro. And by the time we were able to finally get to the table, there were very few spots left, including the 125 acres that was known as ARDA. And part of the challenge of getting a veteran cemetery is there's a couple things. You have to have local support for it, which we felt we did have. And we also needed to have some land. And finding a sizable piece of land in Orange County is a real challenge. When I was first asked, I would say 400 acres, and people would rock back in their chair and their eyeballs would go to the ceiling. But as it turns out, 100 acres is about what the Veterans Administration says is an ideal size for a state veteran cemetery, which is what we were pursuing. And Irvine had MCAS El Toro. MCAS El Toro had 125 acres that they had set aside for later considerations. And we pointed to that and said, gee, that looks like a good spot. Why don't we have a veteran cemetery there? And that's how we got involved in Irvine.
And how did it go? Generally describe the Irvine experience that ultimately, led you to look other places. What is it about Irvine that ultimately led you personally to think about, let's look at a different slot? And I mean, I asked the same question of all of you.
Well, to make it very brief, we really came to the realization that what enabled us to, if you will, veteran cemetery on the ARDA site, which was Sharon Quirk Silva's 1453 many years ago, we did get to a point where we needed to define a specific site to get through the Appropriations Committee. Otherwise, our cemetery bill would die and we'd probably never see another opportunity for it. We had to select something. And I was appointed to the ad hoc veteran cemetery site in Irvine. A second meeting of that, it became obvious there were only a few that were going to be presented. One was called the Cultural Terrace in the Great Park, of which the mayor had his eye on for his great cemetery. So I know that wasn't going to go anywhere. And the ARDA was kind of a cast aside. We desperately needed some site to lay claim to go forward in the legislature. So I pointed out the ARDA. At that time, I was gavelled down by Chairman Jeff Lalloway as being out of order. Larry Agram in the meeting. And while he wasn't a committee member, at the next city council meeting, he proposed that the ARDA go forward. And this is the amended and restated development agreement transfer site, it's actually called, that we put this forward. It met our criteria because it was land, and the Sharon's bill went forward. And in that, we got a defined site, which was going to be also veteran cemetery firmly into the Orange County vocabulary. And it gave us a legislative placeholder to move forward. We now had some kind of an anchor in the legislature that said there will be a veteran cemetery in Orange County. And it will be a state veteran cemetery, as we realized, because of the Millennium Rule in the Veterans Administration that defines the proximity that you can have another veteran cemetery where there is one with existing working capacity, which in our case was Riverside National Cemetery. So we went forward then with the ARDA site, recognizing that it was not an ideal, recognizing the reason that it was still sitting there empty is because it was a mess. It's contaminated. It's got a lot of buildings that may or may not have historical significance. It has an existing road that bisects it completely, which violates the rules for a veteran cemetery. The utilities under it. It's built essentially getting to school. And it's got proximity to schools, proximity to homes. It's got a lot of things that were really wrong with it, but it was a site and it put us on the map, and it put veteran cemetery, like I said, in the Orange County vocabulary. The other thing it gave us was a piece of trade bait. Now, once the cemetery was established, nothing happened following that. There was no legislative action. There was nothing in Irvine. There were no committees. There was no intent. There was no practice to move this thing forward and transfer it, the land, to the state of California through CalVet. Although there was a study that several $100,000 was spent on for the Artisite, but nothing really happened. And the reason nothing really happened is that the cemetery, to meet certain people's requirements, there did not need to be a cemetery developed. There only needed to be a cemetery designated on the site to prevent the developer, who has rights to reacquire that land at whatever the terms the city would offer to them. And a certain party that helped us move forward with the cemetery was also using us to block the developer's rights. And the cemetery sat there and did nothing. Now, it did serve us as a nice piece of festering trade bait, because we knew nobody really wanted the cemetery there. And lo and behold, a couple of years later, we were offered the strawberry field, which again took two different administrations in the city before we went forward with that. And we felt then that the strawberry field, we liked its location, which was very prominent at the sitting there at the Y. It had nothing on it that we needed to worry about. It was just strawberries. It had never been developed. It was the overrun of the runway. It was a crash area. It was perfect. And also, we could not consider that the first time around, because that was private property. That was not in a domain we could and say, give us this land. But the developer offered to swap it to reacquire his rights on the ARTA. And along with that package, we would get a prominent piece of land and a promise from the developer to go ahead and build out phase one of the cemetery at his expense. So it was really a win-win all around for the veterans. We had something that we would be honoring veterans today on the strawberry field if it had gone forward. And Irvine still has a problem with the Artisite that is going to cost them $100 million to clean up, scrape, get all the stuff out of there. There is asbestos, there is oil, there is hydraulic fluid, there are contaminated buildings, and the developer would have taken on that burden from the city of Irvine. So we thought we had a win-win in the city of Irvine. But that, of course, did not meet a certain person's requirement to thwart the contractual rights of a developer. And a referendum was run around. There were battles in front of every Trader Joe in Irvine, gathering signatures. And it became obvious that once the strawberry field was defeated with Measure B, that there just was not going to be a veteran cemetery on MCAS El Toro. And from that point on, we had another long round of bureaucratic gestation combined with some with the COVID setback. And lo and behold, 2.5 years later, we had to wait this thing all the way out until it came to its full gestation. And in that process, of course, the Gypsum Canyon site became more and more viable in our eyes. The more we looked at it, the more we thought, well, this is a real situation, because we're never going to get out of referendum litigation briar patch that was Irvine. It's just not a win. And we do have a win over here, which is, of course, county land. It's ready to go. We think it's a magnificent site. It's going to be one of the most beautiful, monumental veteran cemeteries in the country when that thing is built out.
So tell me about this, and maybe where is it that you all decided to go organize? And I mean, Nick, maybe you can speak to this of like, how did you go from saying, okay, we're stuck in a situation here for a variety of different political reasons, we're not seeing progress on this site. How do we move to another site? How do we gain a consensus amongst veterans? And as Nick, as you've mentioned before, even the veterans in this case, we in the press corps have had lots of times where we've gone to press conferences and we're trying to figure out who speaks for the veterans. How do you do that? And what did you all learn when you took up that organizing challenge?
Well, first, quickly, I think I think it was the final push by, I think you definitely, in terms of voice of OC, just the nature of voice, kind of rang in my head when you were doing interviews and you said, well, look, who speaks for these people? I mean, who people there speaking for the veterans. We had our Valor group and Bill's group. But I think it's, again, the wonderful thing about the press is the press can, bring clarity to issues. And, you challenged me and said, look, who speaks for them? And I was able to kind of put that in the back of my head, thinking, really, they're a coalition. We don't really have a singular voice. And I felt that it, really would be important in order to move this. We had to have our voice heard. So with Bobby and Steve and Bill, primarily, I mean, these three gentlemen are clearly very, very steeped in the veterans community, or, among the handful of veterans that have kind of been involved in and remain involved in board of directors and every other possible leadership role in the veterans community. So I had the skill in terms of, how to perhaps organize and how to advance issues. I had that, skill set, but penetration in the veterans community, I had zero skill set in. I mean, and handling them and dealing with them and organizing them, I had no penetration. So had to go to these three gentlemen who have deep penetration and deep respect in the veterans community and said, look, we spoke and I mentioned to them that in order for us to do this, there's a certain way, and that is building your voice and getting your voice heard. Do need numbers, and we need a strategy, and we need to know how we're going to pull this off. And they are the guys that organize the veterans community. I virtually did almost nothing in terms of organizing the veterans community. So it was their.
So let's talk about that, Bobby. I mean, you're a former chair of the Veterans Advisory Committee here in Orange County that advises the Board of Supervisors. What's your sense of it? Maybe you and Steve can speak a little bit about how did you get there? How did you go and organize a community that, again, in every posting that I have ever had as a reporter, that it's not always been, very organized in some of the communities that I've seen. And I've worked in San Bernardino, San Diego. Well, back in DC is a different story, but I hear similar concerns a lot of times about the need to better organize in the veterans community so that we issues that we see at the VA a lot. So can you speak a little bit about how did you tackle that? Because it's, as far as I remember, you organized every single VFW hall in Orange County. And remind me how many of those are.
There's 7 or 8, but you're leaving out the American Legion. We had quite a few of them. We had the DAV, we had AMVETS, we had a bunch. I think there's a bigger picture here. Up until 2012, there really wasn't anything going on for veterans in Orange County. There was no money coming into the county. Thanks to Chase Wickersham and, of course, Steve Spriggs and Pete Seitz and Nick and Bill. We kind of got together and started to build that relationship with the different groups in it, letting the veterans know they had a voice. There's over 130,000 veterans. And, my feeling was everyone was happy that 50,000 would show up for Veterans Day events, but I was, okay, we got 130, got 50 out. Well, where's the rest of the 70 or 80 other thousand veterans? Where are they? And so it's always been a push since 2012. It was really neat because you had, I'll fast forward now, while the Irvine project was going forward. Just so happens our former supervisor and now district attorney, Todd Spitzer, got land, did a deal with Donald Brin and got land up there in the Anaheim Hills, Gypsum Canyon area from Donald Brin. They were going to build housing units up there and they just decided to trade it out. But it was under the caveat that you build a cemetery. Well, at that same point in time, the county was looking for a cemetery for its own self. So we had the county cemetery look for things, and we were looking for the veterans. When Todd Spitzer got the land, one of the things he wanted to do was just keep it quiet. He did not want to get into and rightly so, didn't get into the stuff that's going on. I was always a happy camper about the site because it was going to be a county site, not a city site, a county site. And when Supervisor Wagner came in, he had been a former mayor of Irvine. So he knew all the ins and outs. Fast forward July 1st, we came into a perfect storm. By July 1st, we had a perfect storm where the Cal Vet had come in and did the schedule, did the evaluation of the land. It was 110 million for the art site, as Bill said, and 90 for the golf. We already know that people in the community of Irvine didn't want it anymore for building. So Don Wagner made the decision, and with the Board of Supervisors, to have a press conference on July 1st and say, hey, this is where we're going to build it. We're going to build it, the county cemetery, veteran cemetery first. Coming out of that, the Board of Supervisors had a meeting, came together and said, we're going to give you $20 million for the site. So the county bought in. That's part of the perfect storm. Then after that, Nick and the rest of us got together and say, you know what, the best way to do it, and thank you, Nick, for this, is to go out to each one of the city councils and ask for support. As it became a regional piece, it became something that the community can buy in. Now, the last time, as I did my research, the last time all 34 cities got together and voted for something was measuring money. But then again, they were getting money. So they all voted for it. There was no skin in the game for them other than veterans. And I don't know if you know this or not, but we have 13 cities with veterans on out of the 34 cities. So the point is we got a third of the cities involved. We got them all now. And that's a big deal. And again, it's a perfect storm. Now, that was the first time we all really kind of got together. But the bottom line is we made it happen. It galvanized and made us all happen. And
how did you do it at like city halls? And again, Steve, if you want to speak to this too, fair enough. Like, did you literally go to VFW and American Legion halls and have drinks and talk about why this is? And what is it that moved it? What did you learn about organizing amongst veterans? And any of you that want to.
Well, Steve, why don't you, you haven't spoken yet, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
All right, well, Bill Cook and I have both been the commanders of the Orange County American Legion. There's 28 posts. We have about 8,000 members. We're all Vietnam veterans, and this seemed to be a fairly simple ask when I got involved in it. The unit that I served with had 731 casualties over a 5-year period. They all came home and got buried in either veteran cemeteries or their local cemeteries. Orange County was built by veterans. Orange County became one of the most successful areas in the entire world, and an awful lot of it done by veterans. Don Brent is a veteran. He is the head of the Irvine company. So I think we all knew that if we got everybody's attention, that the cities would go along with this because it made so much sense. As Bobby said, there's a lot of veterans that are part of these elected officials in all of these cities in Orange County. And if you think about this, the 6th largest veteran community in the country and one of the most successful veteran communities in the country, that this would be an easy deal to sell. Recognize that why wouldn't they go along with this? We just needed to get to get organized, to form the coalition that we have, the Gold Star Mothers, the VFWs, the AMVETs, the whole 9 yards, and have resolutions written up. And it started with one city, and it became a steamrolling effect because we all went to these and contacted the cities. And of course, the county got behind it also. That was in my opinion, the county administration got behind this, and there wasn't really any reason for anybody to oppose that other than what was going on in Irvine for their own political reasons. So think about this. This all happened within 90 days from start to finish. This is a pretty impressive performance, I'd have to say, but a lot of hard work also.
Yeah, and I think what you're looking for is how did Bobby and Bill and Steve kick off the organizing drive? So I think the way to look at it, it was typical from coalition building. That is pretty traditional in the traditional approach. So we had Bobby and Steve and Bill and a few others that were, very noted and celebrated leaders in the veterans community. So they then contacted the leadership of these various organizations, whether it was the VFW or American Legion, AMVETS, Gold Star Moms, all these organizations. They, of course, all the leadership because of their, position in the veterans community. So they went out and organized the leaders, the district commanders, the state commanders, the regional commanders, the post commanders, and they were able to get to them, and then it pyramided. And those leadership then contacted their members. They held meetings that we went to. They did surveys. Some of them did votes by email, and penetrated the message. And then, just like any other organizing attempt, as we got more organizations on board, it began to, pyramid. I mean, that's, kind of organizing 101. And we just use those techniques. But again, we have to, can't underestimate the power of this. But it was, the strength of the leadership in the veteran community, directed and begun by, Bill and Bobby and Steve primarily. So it was a pretty typical organizing drive. But
what's the toughest aspect of organizing that you would tell any Native community group? What did you guys learn? Is it the follow-up? Is it working the phone? Is it going out and speaking with people? And where is it that typically organizing efforts kind of fall off or trail off? And why didn't that happen to you all?
Well, let me throw this out. Let me just finish that question and I'll turn it over to Bobby. Organizing is where organizing efforts fail are two kind of major areas. One, that there isn't support for the issue. And that's how, it's very difficult when there isn't, unanimity in terms of desire. The second thing is just plain hard, 7 days a week, nonstop work. And that's what this took. It took 7 days a week, no days off. We worked through a 2-day holiday week, Memorial Day. We worked through July 4th. We didn't celebrate the holidays. We were out working. And that's where they fall apart, is the amount of work that's necessary is so burdensome that it's tough. So go ahead.
What is the work?
Let me.
And Bobby, you can speak to this.
Yeah, Bobby.
Well, there's a couple things. I agree with Nick, but the butt clause to that is I saw it as an to get with a lot of the groups and talk to them, talk to the leaders. I mean, we had a big, gigantic program over at the VFW in Anaheim, a couple hundred people, and it doesn't hurt to have a barbecue neither. but kept from there. But we had like 9 politicians there, 9 leaders from the community. But we got a chance to talk about it among the group. And because of that, and got together and met afterwards. But we were finding out what the issues were, really wanted to hear. Okay. I mean, one of the things that Nick devised that was, I don't want to say this too bad. I don't want to say it to get too big, but he was brilliant. Okay. Came up with a Mythbusters thing. So we found the 5 or 6 questions that everybody was asking. Okay. That we had the answer for it. They heard there was, and we put the answers to it. This is a myth. This is a fact. And it worked. And so when we went to the different city council meetings, or we went to the different VFWs, or actually in Placentia, where they have their own Veterans Affairs Committee, you go to those different places, you find that, and you sit there and talk to the people. They ask you questions, you bring you back your answers, and you go. It's all about working. It's marketing. It's PR. It's all those kind of combinations. So
as you said, it's listening to people and it's answering questions. It's that back and forth of organizing, right, where you start moving them from against to kind of in the middle to for it. You all spent that. And is it fair? It's kind of starting at Memorial Day. It's kind of interesting.
Well, actually, it started July 1st. We had a press conference with Don Wagner. We started about the 21st to start going to the city council meeting.
Well, I think you try. Remember, if you're trying to get a timeline, yeah, Memorial Day, that weekend we started. Yeah, that's when we really started. Yeah. But then, and we had groups obviously going into July 1st. Yeah. But nice. And by the way, we would be extraordinarily remiss not to talk about the fact that, as Bobby mentioned, the Board of Supervisors, I mean, they came on, and I think that's one thing that we really learned in this organizing drive. This is a regional issue. It's not City of Irvine's Veterans Cemetery. It's a state cemetery for, that would be placed here in the Southern California area. And it's a regional issue, and it takes it really takes the whole county being involved, the entire region being involved. So once the Board of Supervisors, who has the regional capability to put this together along with the Orange County Cemetery District, I mean, then we had the kind of fuel engine, we needed, but we still had to drive the car, and we still had to stay on the road, driving all day and all night,
It's a rare thing to see the Board of Supervisors in Orange County take on a regional role. It's been something they've been afraid of for a long, long time. When the Great Park was first available, instead of, in a sense, going to control it or have leadership on it, they basically left it to Irvine. Now, granted, the county was proposed, so I think when Irvine leaders, when those referendums were done, maybe the county wasn't in a good position to be a leader for that. But I've covered the board for maybe more than 15 years, and I've never seen them take on a regional issue. For them to step up and really lead on that regional panel. But this seemed to offer them an opportunity. It sounds like all of you are saying that the leadership from the Board of Supervisors kind of helped in taking that off, an example of where a regional body can make a difference. Fair in your minds?
Absolutely fair.
Absolutely.
100%. 100%. Yeah, 100% that, it's a regional issue, and the Board of Supervisors, but the Board of Supervisors have to veterans issues with Heroes Hall. I mean, they have been extraordinarily helpful to that there would be a veterans museum. They took on that as a regional issue and has been, extraordinarily helpful in that. And same with the cemetery. And I think, the board was prepared to move in at any time they felt that the veteran community wanted them to, but they were hesitant because of, it was a local jurisdiction that was handling it. And so, I think there was a courtesy that was extended, but once it became abundantly clear and evident that there was no way the Irvine situation would work. The community wasn't prepared for it. It just was not going to happen. Then the board exercised its leadership role, and they have done a stellar job. I mean, they've demonstrated a sterling example of when you can get regional support, how much you do. So this is a good lesson for all.
Norberto, let me add to that too. Let me go back to Heroes Hall. Because of Heroes Hall, and because of the bipartisan nature of Heroes Hall, a lot of the legislators have been using it to do their Veterans of the Year. We've done a big thing because of the makeup of the county. You know, it's become very, very dynamic with ethnic individuals that are here in the community that we can find. People, my uncle was this, my aunt was this, you know, whether it be Black, Japanese, Chinese, you know, you name it, Italian, whatever the case may be, all the different. It's been a bit really, really galvanizing. And plus also, Heroes Hall went out to the community and helped some of the VFW posters and some other people work. So it has taken its time. That's why it was a perfect storm.
Now, let's ask this. Why do we need a veteran cemetery? I mean, a cemetery is a cemetery, right? Why do we need one in Orange County? Why not just drive to Riverside or San Diego?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm glad you asked that. And I know, Nick, you go after me this time, Nick. The thing is this, it's a 75-mile rule. Back and God bless Secretary Imbasiani, because he just told me this a couple of weeks ago. They're working on a piece now because it's a 75-mile rule. You can't have a cemetery within that area. However, back east, that's the rule. Out here, it's time. You try to go to LA, even for the columbarium piece, that's 2 hours to go 30 miles or 40 miles, okay? It still takes, depending on some time of the day, an hour and a half to get to Riverside. So they're reviewing this. And this happens up north too. In the Vallejo area and a few other areas, you can't get there. People are complaining. In California, it's kind of spread. Looking at trying to revive that rule as we speak right now. Go, Nick.
Oh, no, I was going to say, Bill, you should probably why we need this cemetery here in the.
Well, certainly. There's a very, very large veteran population that the Veterans Administration recognizes. And you can see that by looking at the grant priority listing for the state cemetery. It's part of their program. And they recognize that the number of unserved veterans in this particular community are very, very large. Now, I frequently ride motorcycle escorts comrades out to Riverside National Cemetery. And going out to Riverside and returning is just an all-day consuming event. It's not anything you can do very easily or very quickly. And there's always the traffic question, even in Orange County, before you get out there. Going down to Miramar, you would think would be easy, but if you come back to San Diego now, even worse than trying to get out to Riverside, airport you don't even want to consider.
Why do veterans need their own cemetery? Why not just bury veterans with other people and again, I'm just asking the question of why is there that policy need to have your own space?
This is
because it's something we earned.
There you go.
We made a bet with the United States with our life. We signed up. When I signed up for the Marine Corps, I was 17 years old. About a year into my term in the Marine Corps, Vietnam was going strong. I didn't know I was going to go to war. I went into the Marine Corps, and as I wound up in Vietnam. I was there for the Tet and that. I didn't expect going to be aftermath of that going on for years. I'm still walking around, but as most of us know, we still carry a lot of it with us. It's one of the things that is promised to veterans. I've been looking forward to it. A lot of veterans look forward to it. A lot of veterans' families look forward to honoring veterans in that particular way. Talked to a number of folks that are getting quite along vis-a-vis of the saying, "Would you please hurry up with this cemetery? I can't stay above ground much longer." I have others that have talked to me and said, "I'm holding my loved one's remains on the shelf, waiting for the day to be in a local cemetery that honors their service near our home." I've talked to others who have said they plan to disinter their relatives from the cemeteries where they're buried and move them to the Orange County Cemetery as soon as it's available, because this is something that is it acknowledges our service. And 91 freeway, you get about one up there, you can see that hill, and that is going to be a magnificent monument that will be there for better than the next century once that builds out. The setting sun will glitter off of the white veteran headstones up there, and everyone passing that direction will know that these people from Orange County were willing to bet their lives for the freedom that everybody in this county and this nation enjoys. And that's why we want our cemetery.
Said. What all learned from those Tuesday nights when you went into, I mean, you basically took 34 different hills, you know, from an organizing perspective. What did you learn about our county? What did you learn about advocating for veterans issues in that 90 days where you hit up 34 different city councils and ultimately won every single one of them, right? You didn't lose one of those city council votes, correct?
Not a one. What I learned from that is that there was a very, very deep support for the veteran cemetery out there, not being voiced up as long as prior patch was active. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. But once they had the opportunity to be free of it, we received very, very enthusiastic support from almost every council we went to. Were in tears wanting to support us and thanked us for the work that we've been doing all these years, and thanked us for the opportunity that they had to announce their support with a resolution. And very, very moving experience for the most part for me. I feel much stronger for having gone out and done that as a veteran.
I found from the veterans representatives that were on the teams made them feel pretty good. I mean, there was something they could buy into, and you know, it's part of theirs. It's part of their life now. But
now, let me ask.
Agree with Bill. I'm going to agree with Bill. The bottom line here is they could buy into a project that was all veterans. The county wanted it. It's something they needed also. Hey, it was a fait accompli. We just had to work for it. We had to go at it.
Let me ask you this, and we'll probably wrap up here. What's the next steps? So I know that there's state legislation that I think designated Irvine as the place. Is that what has to get adjusted next? What are the next? Will we be, in a sense, out on that land watching you all, in a sense, get that dream you fought over this last decade to get?
Well, I mean, the next steps are preparing the property to be deeded over to the state. So that includes environmental reviews. It looks at engineering issues, and so all that in the process of being done. I mean, there's a lot of administrative work that has to be done, and that's ongoing. It's moving ahead, moving the utilities in, which was something that the people who have opposed this site have been stating all over that's going to be a big problem. Well, that problem's now been, so they'll begin to get the utilities going, and then of course there's a legislative issue where we have to now move to get some legislation modified to designate and include this site, and that's ongoing now, and we're very get that done in the legislature. And once that's done, which the legislation would take place in January, that's when the legislature comes back and will take the legislative action. We'll be moving forward. So those are the next steps.
When do you think we would have what would you have a ceremony out there, designating it as a gun? When does the flag go on that hill? What do you think?
Well, I think that's, that's so, That's so difficult to because when you get into land use issues, there are a lot of issues we all know from our personal lives and just watching major projects. So I think it's too tough to put a timeline on now. I think after January, I think we're going to be in a much better position after the first of the year to have a better idea of the timeline. So I think we're going to wait until exactly where we're going to be in terms of timing.
Got it.
Yeah, there is a sequence of bureaucratic gestation that needs to go on before Calvet will be in a position to accept the land. This will be a state veteran cemetery. It needs to be on state. The county will have to cede title of that particular piece of property, which will be half of the cemetery, the site that CD 30 acres, I believe, which will be ceded to the state. Once the state is to take title, the ceremony that I really look forward to is the day that the county hands title of that particular piece of property to the state of California for Calvet to develop a veteran cemetery. Once the state has the land, I will consider the efforts that I've been doing for the last couple of decades successful.
And I really appreciate you all walking us through this kind of organizing effort.
Yeah,
maybe
so
if anything,
I want to. I want to, before we conclude, I think what's really important, and I think it's very important that the people of Orange County and the readers of Voice, which I know now is about 1 million readers. So for your million readers, what I really want them to know is it wasn't us that did this. I mean, that's critical. It wasn't us that moved this. It was the veterans that moved this ball. Yeah. This success is not ours. It's not Valor's or any other organizations. This success belongs to the veterans community because the veterans in this community, are the ones that joined in solidarity and joined to accomplish this mission. Rank and file veterans who've made this happen. And if we proceed to other projects down the road, it's going to be equally dependent on the veterans and the veterans community to move that forward. So this is a victory for the veterans community. This is a victory for veterans and the voice of veterans. And that, I hope, is the lesson that can be taken when we work together, when we put aside other differences and focus on mission. Anything will not be able to for veterans in this county, which is so accepting and has put their arms around us. So I think that's critical.
I appreciate your insight, and I appreciate your service not only on the battlefield but here back in peacetime to advocate around projects like this, in terms of veterans. I don't know if you ever have any thoughts about things like a veterans hospital as well. And I know that I don't want to necessarily confuse the topics here, but is something like that, I mean, that's another issue that I think about, that again, a veteran, has to drive a long way out to Long Beach or whatever to get serviced. And you wonder, I know that Fairhaven is a site that was once a state facility. It's 100 acres. It's basically a hospital that's been developmentally a developmental facility. Are things like that, or do you worry more about let's get this project done and then move on to other things if it's there?
Well, I think for Valor, our position is we've been very clear with our board is we're going to focus on getting this done and put our efforts, because as you mentioned, I mean, it's a lot of work. I mean, this is a tremendous amount of work. So we want to finish this, and then, we're going to be anxiously looking forward to any other project that will advance the, veteran community and the service to the veterans community.
Anybody else?
Agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, we have Long Beach VA, but there are also clinics all over Orange County. So actually, the veterans have a pretty good opportunity to access health care in Orange County. There are probably other counties don't have nearly as much access, actually, as Orange.
Are there any other issues, homelessness, other things that you see impacting the veterans community that just in general, we're going into Veterans Day, just curious on your general thoughts of like, what are some of the, other than the cemetery, what are other salient issues that leaders worry about or worry about their fellow brothers and sisters?
Well, that's one for Steve.
I would like to tackle that. The employment is the big deal. There, virtually anybody that's ever come to Orange County has wanted to stay here. Oftentimes, I grew up in a real small town in Ohio, and I would never want to go back there to live because Orange County is a special place, and you can make a very good living here. But it is also really expensive to live here. So a key piece of what we should think about being veterans is to help veterans with employment and entrepreneurship. I mean, it costs $900,000 to buy a house in Orange County. Can you imagine a veteran getting out of college, how long it would take them to make enough money to qualify to buy a home in Orange County? Just a number. Top 20 is the largest in the country. In 2020, in the counties where veterans were able to buy a home. It's the largest, but virtually no veterans could afford to buy homes in LA County. Forget about LA County. How expensive is it in Orange County? So employment, I'm part of a group, and Bobby is also, California Veterans Chamber of Commerce, which is working on trying to upgrade the employment opportunity and entrepreneurship for veterans in Orange County, because without really to live here, it's just.
Now, what about homelessness? That's another issue where I oftentimes hear that a scary portion of the homeless community are veterans, people who maybe have had PTSD or other issues and are having adapting to life back home.
Once again, it goes back to you lose a job or something happens, it's really easy to become homeless in the greater Los Angeles area. And once you become homeless, a veteran, it's really hard to get out of that because without a live, it's hard to get a job and so forth. And there are some organizations that have been built living, occupancy types of county. In LA County, they're building about a 1,200 unit for veterans at the Long Beach or the LA Veterans Center up there. You've got one in Long Beach, but you're right. LA County is the largest homeless veterans community in the country. And there's a lot of work going into it. But once again, it all goes back to if you can't get a job, you can't afford to live in the greater Los Angeles, Orange County area. You just can't. And it's all about employment. It truly is.
Thanks, guys. Again, I'll probably wrap this up. And just if any of you all have any thoughts, this will be running sometime around Veterans Day. If you have any thoughts in general that you want to share, just in terms of, again, why we recognize Veterans Day and what is it that as veterans that you hope that people will think about on that day.
Well, let me say this, for Orange County veterans, we are, our message from Valor is, well, we really appreciate, the recognition on Veterans Day. It's veterans saying thank you to a community and of elected officials and others who've stood by us during this last 2 years. So for Veterans Day, our message is thank you, but recognition this Veterans Day is flipped. Instead of us being recognized, we want to recognize all those who stood up to help us. And that's our message.
Absolutely.